In the dark future of the 40,000th millennium, there is only war. Welcome to Pegwarmers. I'm Kevin, and I'm here to talk about toys. Today, I'm doing another one of these, setting up the toy room videos. I recently did a live episode. Somebody asked me about the build-out down here in the basement and some of the stuff I'm working on. And I've got a corner that's kind of getting good. And in that corner, I have a desk for, hobby stuff. And there's a considerable amount of space above that desk for shelving that I've been dying to get some stuff displayed on. And once the shelves are up there, then I can kind of fill in with other carded stuff around a window and around those shelves. And so it's kind of been holding up progress in that area. So I finally got the shelves up and I'm excited to talk about it. Besides toy collecting, one of the hobbies I've always enjoyed is painting miniatures for tabletop battle games. When I was in elementary school, late elementary school / middle school, I got into painting Dungeons & Dragons miniatures, and then by the start of high school, my buddies and I were playing Warhammer 40,000. Now, we played the old Hammer 2nd edition through 3rd edition, maybe even into 4th edition. We never wanted to buy new codexes and stuff, and we didn't really go out and play too much at local shops and things like that. We mostly just played in my basement against each other in different combinations. And so I have a real affinity for the old Hammer aesthetic of Warhammer, but I bought miniatures much beyond that, so I have some of the more modern-looking things. And then during COVID, I got back into painting. I have not done as much painting since I moved here as I would have liked to have done, but I do have a desk set up for the hobby, and it's kind of a disaster. My hobby desk, when I lived with my parents, was always full of stuff, and then I moved all that to the basement of my house when I bought my first house, and that space never was set up as well as I would have liked. It was always very dark and dim and damp. But I did paint a lot, like I said, during COVID. And then now that we're in this place, I wanted to kind of reset up that hobby space. So when I get the itch, I can paint. I also want to display some of the stuff. So I don't want all the models scrolled away. And I just love the artwork and the packaging and everything related to this hobby. So this is not quite a typical toy thing, but just so that way I don't bog you down too much with other things, I do have a couple of more traditional Pegwarmers type things to show you. I was going to talk about these two custom Sergeant Slaughters on the live episode, I think, and then forgot to mention them. I've had these two guys for quite some time. They were made out of just sort of parts in a parts bin, and so it's two Sergeant Slaughters. They both have the brown hat. One uses the version 3 torso from Sergeant Slaughter, but there's definitely some painted details on him. I don't know if somebody custom painted him, but I think I found him just the way he is in a childhood collection that a friend of mine bought. I don't think these are his original arms, because the version 3 Sergeant Slaughter has the fingerless gloves and obviously has the removable hat. So even though it's using multiple versions of Sergeant Slaughter, there's some custom parts there. And this other one has a Sergeant Slaughter head and the arms from the Mail Away Sergeant Slaughter, the Wrestling USA shirt version, which I think is where these two heads came from. But he's got a Slaughter Marauder Footloose body. And I know that there was a Slaughter Marauder Slaughter, obviously, but he's in the tank top, and I kind of like this one, a little bit more combat gear. Just kind of a fun alternate look for him. And I just think these figures are kind of neat. And just wanted to, show them off in an episode. There's a large space above the desk, which would be perfect for displaying things. Some of the things I wanted to put up was the box that the original 2nd edition game came in, as well as packaging from other miniatures, and display some miniatures that have been painted by myself and some of my friends. I happen to have basically all my friends' Warhammer armies because we used to play it at my parents' house, and when we kind of all stopped playing at the same time, and I moved all of their stuff out of my parents' house with me to my house, and so now it's here. I kind of measured the space and mapped out the way I wanted the shelving. I don't think I ended up installing it quite the way I had planned, but it worked out pretty well. There are 3 different length shelves here, which is a little bit odd, but I was trying to get full advantage of display space based on the action figure cubbies next to it and the desk. So the bottom shelf is as long as the desk, which would be ideal for probably all the shelves, and maybe the second shelf should have been the same length. But I was worried a little bit about the window that's at the top, and there's also like a little bump out on the opposite side that I had to worry about. So the upper shelf, I believe I plan to install a little bit higher. But when I was installing it, I just kind of went with like the highest I could comfortably reach without using a ladder, which I think was probably the right call anyway. It got it up high enough that I could put things up there and display them without having to get a ladder all the time. But it does give me a little blank space at the top, and I've been sort of trying to avoid blank space. Like, I'm really trying to pack everything in. But you can see that I used a drill. I marked where the brackets were going to go. I drilled holes. I put in mollies or plastic anchors in there to help reinforce it. My basement's a little funny. I had a hard time using the stud finder to find where there were wooden framing inside the wall. I was getting some weird readings, and sometimes when I drilled, I felt like I was hitting wood. So I used the anchors where I could, and some places I just screwed in, and I'm pretty sure that it's secure because I could feel that I was drilling into something else, and, you know, there is some framing behind the drywall down here. I do know that. I bought the shelving and the shelf brackets and the white painted screws, which give it kind of a nice finish look. I bought all that at Home Depot. I did get large sheets of the melamine shelving, and I had to cut them down on a table saw. I couldn't find, like, sort of shelf-sized pieces, which is what I wanted to buy, and I was going to just buy 3 of the longer size and then just cut them down. I ended up getting really large panels and cutting them. I was actually buying other material for some other shelving projects around the house in my stepson's rooms. And so I actually ironed on edge banding that you adhere it. It's got glue on the back, and you melt the glue by rubbing a clothes iron on the front side. And that hides any exposed particle board that results from cutting it. So I edge banded it and filed everything off really nice. And started mounting these up. The top one, like I said, is a little bit lower than I had planned, but it was really kind of a good height to reach. The second shelf then, because the top shelf was a little lower, I felt like I needed to go a little higher, and maybe I went too close. It's a little bit snug. I did make sure that some of the items I wanted to fit on that shelf did fit. Final aesthetic, maybe I should have gone down another inch. It's a little weird because I measured all this out and made a good plan, and then I don't know what I did with the plan. I certainly didn't use the plan when I went to install it. I used it when I cut the pieces to length. And it's kind of a stupid move on my part. I don't know if I left the plans at the saw. I probably have a photo on my phone because I tend to take pictures of plans so I don't lose them, or I have them no matter where I'm at. But I didn't really consult it when I went to install. I just started sort of referencing things based on the actual items I wanted to put up. So the second shelf installed very similarly, and basically just lined the brackets up just below the next set of brackets, drilled, screwed, everything all kind of the same procedure. Then the third shelf, which is the longest shelf that butts up against the action figure cabinet. This one, I wanted to make sure that I could put some bigger things on it, and the height didn't matter too much. I do have a little Lazy Susan item that I'm not really using currently, but I have used on my model table before, and I made sure that fit under this shelf when I was putting it up, and I made sure there was plenty of room to put larger items, because I do have the McFarlane Corn Berserker figure that I took a look at recently on an episode, and I want him to go on the shelf. I already have a Tyranid Gene Stealer figure from McFarlane that will go on the shelf that was on my desk to start with. So again, the same process. It went fine. It was a pretty easy install. I was very pleased that things came out level each time without too much effort. But I have a fair amount of practice at this kind of thing. I do a lot of sort of handy stuff. Sometimes it works out better than others. But this project worked out well, which is a nice change of pace. The desk is a mess. I painted some Dungeons & Dragons miniatures last school year for the Dungeons & Dragons Club at my school. All the seniors got a miniature from me. I actually made a Patreon video about those figures, and other than that, my painting's been fairly minimal. Here and there, I've been working on some figures, some Terminators from a Space Marine game set that I had gotten for Christmas maybe 2 years ago, and a few other things that are sitting around that I've been working at, dabbling at a little bit here and there. I don't have the table organized the way I want, and so the paints are hard to find, and that's kind of been frustrating. So I'm hoping getting some of the stuff up on the shelves is going to help with that. I know this episode is very Warhammer-centric, and that might not be what most of my viewers are here for, but it is about setting up the toy room. But I do want to cut away to an interesting toy that I was recently shown. My brother-in-law sent me this picture. Has anybody ever seen this before? Does anybody know what it is? He told me it's a 1950s Craft TV cameraman. If you sent in Velveeta box tops and 50 cents, they'd send you this mascot for Craft Television Theater. I've never seen Craft Television Theater. It's just not really my era. But it's a pretty cool little giveaway thing. And I feel like as sort of 80s and 90s collectors, most of the people on here, we're used to the mail-away premiums. And this is just such an interesting little thing. I wanted to share it with you and see if anybody had ever seen this before. So once all the shelves were up, I put the biggest things in place. The top shelf, I have the box from the base game. I also have the expansion Dark Millennium box up there. The Dark Millennium box adds a lot of new features to the game, mostly the psychic powers, which is a pretty big part of the game. Definitely a fun part. I have a sealed Hive Tyrant in its box. That's the main character from the Tyranid army. It's pretty darn cool and very nostalgic. And so that gets put up on the first shelf. Down on the lower shelf, I have a paint set and the box to the Gene Stealers from the Tyranid army and a Space Marine attack bike. And I keep kind of slowly rearranging stuff. I found the Carnifex box. This isn't actually my box. It's my best buddy Brian's. He was the Tyranid player in my group of friends. And somehow his box was spared, saved, whatever, flattened and in with his army. So I put that up on display as well. The Carnifex is probably my favorite second edition model or Old Hammer model in the whole line. I just think it is so cool. I actually have a sealed Screamer Killer Carnifex in its blister, which is like a weird way of seeing it sold. That is old school and before I was involved in the line. I also have blisters with some Chaos Warriors or Chaos Space Marines, and it's just kind of neat to see the different blister styles. I have a couple Space Marine Funko Pops. Originally, I wanted to take the Beaky's head off and put it on the Intercessor body. I was trying to make like an old school Space Marine Funko Pop, but the Space Marine's head, the Assault Trooper from the Blood Angels helmet doesn't come off to be able to swap with the Ultramarine. But anyway, I have two of those Funko Pop guys because they're kind of neat. I was impressed to see Warhammer getting toys or collectibles, if you will, in whatever moment that I saw them. I guess I knew about the McFarlane stuff at that point, but still, it was funny to see them so readily available. I actually bought a second of the Space Marine, the regular Intercessor, because I kind of wanted to do a custom paint job in my chapter. It's just never happened, but there's a second one of him floating around, the blue Marine. So the second shelf I have set up with a bunch of retro boxes, like I had mentioned, and then a bunch of miniatures. I have some orcs on display. I have like an orc war boss and a orc weird boy who's like their shaman, and the minders. These are guys that kind of keep him from running away from the battlefield and help protect him. I have some Tyranids with Brian's Hive Tyrant and Carnifex on display, and some Gene Stealers. In the middle, I have some Eldar figures. There's two Dreadnoughts and a Warwalker. They got kind of beat up. Oh, and the Avatar. They got kind of beat up in transportation when I was moving. A friend of mine dropped my buddy Derek's army. It mostly survived, but some of the big things popped apart, and I got to glue them back together. It'll look a whole lot better once I do that. And then down at the far end, I have some Imperial Guard. Imperial Guard was sort of the second army I tried to build. I started with Space Marines, and then I decided to kind of go with their allies, the Imperial Guard, and bolster up that rank. I've never played a game with an army of Imperial Guard, so I don't know if my army's any good, my forces are any good. I don't know if I have the right strategy. I've never really played like the mob army or a horde army. but I would love to someday. So then the main shelf, I did put the Geocruiser on there because it's right next to my Captain Planet shelf, and that didn't fit. I do have the McFarlane Gene Stealer. In front of that, I have a squad of Legion of the Damn Space Marines. So when I got into Warhammer and my buddy Derek showed me the catalog, the rule book or the painting guide, there was some piece of documentation that had a Legion of the Damn Space Marine in it, and I fell in love with the flames on the black armor, and that's what I really wanted my army to be. And then through the research I was doing at that point in time, it didn't seem like you could have a whole Legion of the Damned army. They're like this ghost unit that shows up to help, and so I sort of inverted the colors. I painted my first Space Marines red with flames that were covered with black flames. Like, so they had orange and yellow flames and then black flames painted over top of them. I eventually abandoned that paint scheme to have black bodies with red shoulder pads with the flames covered with black flames. I kind of painted up basically 2 whole Space Marine armies over the period of time I played because I loved painting the miniatures. They're a lot of fun. You can see I have a Lehman Russ battle tank, which is actually an Imperial Guard tank, but painted up for my Dark Phoenix Space Marine team. Wonder where I got the name for that. The Land Raider, this is a more modern Land Raider, so that was one of the last things I painted while still in the era that I was playing. I also have what I call the new Rhino Beetle. The comic book store where I bought a lot of my early Warhammer stuff got a Rhino returned or damaged, or something weird happened, and I convinced the manager to sell it to me, and it was missing a bunch of parts, mainly the body. And so I crafted my own center section around the treads, and it looked unique and different, and it was in the era of the new Beetle, and I had this Volkswagen transfer, so I stuck that on there. Second edition Warhammer had a lot of jokey stuff to it, and I felt like it fit in, so I made my own custom sort of Rhino body to go with this set of treads I got super cheap. And you can see I've got a squad of Space Marines there painted up. This is what I call my first company, which is really the second version of the guys that I had painted. I don't have my first company on display, although I do have like a captain from my first company out. I should get a couple more of them out just because that's part of the history of my painting style. So I have some special characters and then a bunch of that first company main character figures, like a captain and a Captain in Terminator armor. One of my most proud figures is a custom Tech Marine with a grav gun. My buddy Brian used to get so mad that I would give a Space Marine a jetpack and a grav gun and go and like freeze his big bad guy monsters, and he's like, I need to know which one it is. And so I said, well, what should the grav gun look like? And he said it needs a big radar dish. So I actually used a piece of Psych Out's gun from G.I. Joe, or his like radio brainwave box, and I added it onto a Tech Marine figure, gave him the jump pack and everything. So I had a specifically what you see is what you get Space Marine model with the grav gun, because I didn't really know what a grav gun looked like at that point in time. But we have some good memories with that figure, so he's up on display there with an Apothecary and a Terminator Librarian from the old Space Hulk game. Just got kind of some of the power characters that I had in my army. There's also a small squad of Khorne Berserkers there. They're not necessarily my favorite paint job. They were some of the miniatures I painted during COVID. I definitely want to refine my painting skills there. I know I've improved, every generation or every like period phase I've gone through painting. I still watch a lot of painting videos and tutorials, and I really want to try more of the highlighting. I've gotten into washes and things like that, but I really want to try more of like the edge highlighting and things like that, those techniques, and really try and build up those skills. But you can see I have a wide range of the armies from the 40k universe on display between my various friends' armies, Derek's Eldar, Brian's Tyranids, my Orcs and Chaos and Marines and Imperial Guard. During COVID, I started buying Chaos miniatures because I think I should have always played Chaos. I just didn't really know it was an option, or that it would be my favorite when I started. But I like the non-conformity and the uniqueness and the customization that's available to that style army. So I think it's pretty cool. The rest of the desk, like I said, is kind of a mess, and I'm working on getting it back into better shape. And then next to that, there are shelves with a lot of action figures, and I want to expand out and kind of fill in all the wall space, and then maybe I can kind of give a better overview version of the whole display, you know, as I fine tune it. This was kind of a quick start and a good base setup here. But you know, I wanted to share with you guys the progress I am making, and I know this isn't quite as pure toy collecting, but it's related. Like people that collect vintage toys and have like a vintage video game set up in the same room. This is kind of that for me. I went from toys to Warhammer, and so I want to have a space to do that and a space to be able to kind of display some of that. New to the collection, I was visiting my friend Paul recently. Paul is a childhood friend of mine who is a big part of my YouTube journey, and he recently picked up these two items for me. One is a box of G.I. Joe plastic adhesive bandages, aka Band-Aids. This box is different. It has Flint on it, but it's different than the box I already had. It is green instead of red, and it's a more skinnier package. It's not like the traditional Band-Aid size, so I thought that was pretty cool. He also got me the Flint chapstick, which I did not have, and I believe it is brand new, like never used. Somebody had new old stock of these, and several of them at an antique store he went to, and so he picked both these up for me, and I think that's super rad because I love that kind of weird licensed stuff. I tried to sprinkle in some toy stuff, mostly G.I. Joe. If you're not interested in the 40k stuff, I went to Walmart today trying to find a great Pegwarmer for this episode. I basically just saw the McFarlane John Stewart Superpower figure on clearance. They didn't even have a peg. My Walmart had 10 skull tanks, which I recently showed off. None of the Bug, Blue Beetle's vehicle, and none of the figures from that wave, because I'm trying to find Brainiac and Blue Beetle and Kilowog and stuff. I don't know. It's hard to be a collector these days unless you just order everything online, and that's kind of frustrating. I hope you guys are having a good week. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of my shelves so far. Anybody ever play Warhammer? Which army did you play? Let me know down below. And which edition, if you know that, did you play? Do you currently play? Do me a favor, hit the like button. Tell YouTube that I make good content. If you want to support the channel further, consider joining us on Patreon. And thanks for hanging on the peg with me.